Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 928, and today's date is March 25th, 2016, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, before I get started with the report, I have two announcements. Those people who are celebrating Good Friday, happy Good Friday to you. On Saturday, I'll be uploading an interview with Jeff Nielsen, and if you're on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel, you can go right over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight, should bring you right over to the video. If you're on the X22 Report email alert system, I will send you an email, and you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, you'll see it on the right hand side, or you can go to newssentinel.com, scroll down a little bit, you'll see it on the right hand side on that site. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, the markets are closed here in the US and Europe, Asia, and we see that the US decided to release some information. And it was the final revision of the fourth quarter 2015 GDP. And they released it, and the final result was 1.4%. And the print was still well below the 2% that they thought we were going to hit. And we can see right now that the figure marks a slowdown from the 2.2% average pace in the first three quarters of 2015. Now remember, a lot of this is manipulated. A lot of this has been recalculated. And we can see that this is stuffed in with Obamacare. And I see the corporate media is out there trying to convince everyone that consumer spending is up. You see, we have the strength of the economy. It is keeping the economy going. But when we look closely at what's really going on here, it's not that people are going out to retail stores and buying goods with their discretionary funds. The consumer spending, it is up because of Obamacare. When we look at the spending, we see that people have spent on healthcare in 2015 $1.9 trillion in real dollars. And this is the biggest single source of incremental spending by nearly a factor of 2. It is only a matter of 2 to 3 quarters before healthcare surpasses housing as the biggest use of American cash. Putting all of this into context, a recent report from the Freedom Partners Health found that health insurance premiums have increased faster than wages and inflation in recent years, rising at average about 28% from 2009 to 2014, despite Obamacare. Well, because of Obamacare, we see everything is going up, and you're getting less and less of a benefit. This is what drove American consumer spending. This is what's keeping the economy looking like we're in some type of major recovery. And we can see at this point, people do not have discretionary funds to go out and purchase goods. So we see this hoopla all around the corporate media, the government, trying to make everyone feel like, yes, you see, consumer spending, this is what's, the middle class is back. No. People are being forced to spend this money on health care. Because if you don't, then you're penalized. And they have you because there's no competition. They can continually raise the premiums, and you'll just end up paying more and more and more, and it will keep GDP looking like it's chugging along here. But with all of this, it's only at 1.4% with all the manipulation. Can you imagine if you stripped all this out? We would be in negative territory right now. We see the Baltic Dry Index inching up, and when we look at this, we see that the Baltic's sea freight rates, they have increased, and they're charging higher rates for bigger vessels right now. And this is why we see the Baltic Dry Index ticking up at this time. It's not because things are getting better. It's because there's a little bit of a manipulation going on right now. And they're able to do this by charging more. Now, we know the United States, they want sanctions on Venezuela. And we see that China has said absolutely not. The G77 in China affirmed their solidarity with Venezuela. saying there is going to be absolutely no sanctions against Venezuela whatsoever. Now, of course, we know Obama back on March 3rd signed an executive order saying that we need to renew the sanctions of Venezuela, saying that, it's a national emergency with respect to unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Yeah, because what they want is a puppet government in there that they can control, and they can capture their natural resources and put the country into a huge amount of debt, which kind of they already are, but they will allow them to take their natural resources and they will use the dollar for all of it, and they'll control it. And this is what they're trying to do. Because really, Venezuela is a threat to the U.S.? How? And if you notice, they use all these different terms to make you think like, it must be a threat. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Russia is demanding $683,000 in daily interest on their $3 billion overdue debt. We know that Kiev has defaulted on this debt, and they're looking to collect some interest on this. And we'll have to see what Kiev does at this point, which most likely they're not going to pay it. But we'll have to wait and see. We see out in Libya, the SAS forces, they have been deployed to Libya since the beginning of this year, according to confidential briefings given to the U.S. congressional leaders by the King of Jordan. It was a leaked memo that indicates that the U.S. lawmakers were briefed on all of this, saying that Jordan has special forces that are operating alongside British forces inside of Libya. Now, it looks like the United States government, central bankers, and the coalition forces are going to be making their move inside of Libya. Right now, the U.S. and the coalition forces and the new unity government is saying that Tripoli is under the control of unrecognized administration. And the UN-backed government says we'll be heading to the capital to begin work. Authorities in control of Libya's capital on Friday, they declared a state of an emergency, saying, well, wait a minute. We told you, you cannot come into Tripoli as a government. As individuals, yes, but as a government, absolutely not. And we will reject any government that tries to push into our country. So we're seeing right now that the U.S., France, Italy, Egypt, UK, and the rest of the coalition forces are saying, okay, we've had enough. It is time to make a change. And they're going to push their way into Libya. And this is going to cause a major problem. We see Turkish warplanes. They are striking the PKK in North Iraq right now. Of course, Iraqis are saying, you're not supposed to be doing this. You're in a sovereign country. And we actually ordered the troops out of our country, and you're just not listening. Actually, if you really listen, no one is listening to any of these countries in this area. If we look at Syria, the United States and the coalition forces are not listening to the government there. They just invaded a sovereign country. Iraq has been telling the U.S. and Turkey, listen, get out of our country. Libya, the government there, is saying, hey, you just can't make up a government and say this is the new government because the people elected this government and we are in Tripoli abiding by the constitution of our country. And we see in Yemen, the puppet government was kicked out and the people are saying, we don't want that government. But the U.S. doesn't care about this. They need control of the Middle East. Now, the Pentagon is saying that they're moving to increase U.S. troops in Iraq very soon. So we're going to see this number go up from 5,000 to 7,000, most likely to 10,000. Now, what's very strange about all this is that the Islamic State is on the run, and they're being destroyed in Syria. The Iraqi forces are destroying them in Iraq. But it seems that there's more and more troops heading to all of these areas. Now, you would think, after Russia stepped in and started destroying everything, why would we need more forces in this area if the Islamic State is on the run and they're losing the battles in all these different areas? Towns and cities are being liberated. It makes no sense why more forces at this time would need to come into the picture. Because when we go back 18 months, when the Islamic State was expanding across Syria, where were all the troops? Why didn't they bring more in at that point? Why? Because their proxy army was doing exactly what they wanted. Expanding in Syria, taking over more and more territory, and going to go after Assad after they were ready to do this. And they're causing chaos in Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq. And now what's happening is they're losing their proxy army. So they have to replace these forces with who? The coalition forces. And this is what we're seeing right now. We see that Mark Toner, when he was asked a question about should the Islamic State be taken out of Palmyra, should they be pushed out, and he kind of fumbled and bumbled around, saying that no, broadly speaking, it's not a great choice, either or, but which is worse. I don't know what's worse, the Islamic State or Assad. Well, maybe the Islamic State is worse. And you would think, well, if it's a terrorist group, you wouldn't want the terrorist group inside the country. And you can see he was caught off guard. You can see, well, he knows in the back of his mind that it's the proxy army of the United States government central bankers. And he's trying to figure out a way out of this question. And it just didn't work. Because we see there's ceasefire, peace talks going on right now. We see Russia is pushing the Islamic State out of the country, along with the Syrian forces. And the U.S. is completely backed into a corner. What do they do at this point? And this is what they've been preparing for. Now, when are they going to actually hit? When are they actually going to make this major offensive? We don't know at this point. But we can see forces are definitely being built up. We see, since the Islamic State is being destroyed in Syria and in Iraq, not because of the United States, because of Russia and the Iraqi forces, they had this false flag in Brussels to show that the Islamic State is still strong, to show and to bring the European nations into the area, to bring in more military assets and more troops to go into Syria. And we see right now, for the third time in 2 years, the United States has killed the Islamic State second in command. Now, we see this quite often where the U.S. will come out and saying, oh, we killed the commander, we killed the second in command, we killed the finance minister, and they continually do this, and then all of a sudden, this person reappears someplace else. I mean, this person has died before. Al-Kaduli. He died last April, for instance, in a strike on a mosque in Iraq. And he was killed in this strike, according to the Wall Street Journal. He was also killed in September of 2014, where airstrikes killed him at that point. And here we are once again killing the same exact person. And what they do is they keep moving him around, and hopefully people forget what actually happened. And they're not actually killing these people. They say they're dead, but if they need him once again, they bring him back. What they're doing is they're cleaning up and tidying up certain areas because they know Russia, the Syrian forces are coming in. They know the Iraqi forces are pushing in on Mosul. And we see the U.S. is in cleanup phase right now, trying to clean up documentation, trying to clean up the entire operation. But certain items are being left behind, and they're not doing such a great job. And it's all pointing back to Turkey and to the U.S. Now, we know that John Kerry was visiting Lavrov in Russia, and they made an agreement that they'll have some type or a push for a political transition in Syria by having a new draft of the Constitution ready by August. Now, what's very strange about this is that Syria isn't really involved in this. This is Russia and the U.S. speaking about what they're going to do in Syria. Now, I don't know if the Syrian government agrees with this at all, but they're going to push and talk to the Syrian government in August about a new constitution. But Russia still says, listen, we're not going to talk about if Assad's going to be removed at this point, because it's not up to governments to decide who's going to be in power, who's not going to be in power. It's left up to the people. And of course, this is just the beginning of this peace process where they're trying to push a change in Syria. This is what the United States wants. Now, is this going to happen? We don't know. Because we have many different factors. We have the Syrian government. We have the opposition. We have Saudi Arabia. We have the U.S., Russia. And we know that Russia and Syria are watching the U.S. very, very carefully in what's going on here. So right now, they're talking about it, and they're talking about peace. And remember, the goal is always the same. If the U.S. does not get its way, it will resort to violence and war to remove Assad, period. And I don't think Assad's going to be going down that easily because he's been in this since going back to 2011 here. He's been fighting all this time. He asked Russia to come in and remove the terror threat. And is Assad just going to say, okay, whatever the U.S. wants, that's what I'm going to do? No, he's going to leave it up to the people. And if Assad's voted back into power, guess what? The U.S. is not going to sit back and say, hey, that's okay with me. No. They're going to go after Assad. Actually, they're going to most likely do it before the elections, before any of this. Now, out in Belgium, we see things are shifting where everything is becoming a police state. Just one day after this false flag, we see that governments, media, national security experts are saying that we need less freedoms and more security. Well, that didn't take long. They're saying, listen, to keep everyone safe, we're going to need more security. We're going to need to spy on the people. We're going to need additional laws. We're going to need more boots on the ground. And we see British author and journalist Max Hastings says, our tolerance of electronic surveillance, subject to legal and parliamentary oversight, seems a small price to pay for some measure of security against threats that nobody, today of all days, can doubt are real. In the United States, we see that people are taking this and using it for their own agenda, where they're saying, okay, we need a national commission to explore how the government and law enforcement could access encrypted communications. Now, back in Paris, they didn't use encryption. They used burner phones. Because these are false flag events. And even if it was a real event, let's go with their way of thinking. They're not going to be using an iPhone or an Android phone or Facebook or Twitter to coordinate their plans. They're going to have their own encryption method if they're going to use some type of electronic device. They're going to have a burner phone, or they're going to use any other method. This, again, is about spying on every single person. Now, we're getting more information that the Islamic State, their next attacks could be Russia, and then ultimately the United States. So we can see at this point in time, the Islamic State is completely falling apart. The proxy army is non-existent at this time. They're trying to keep the fear factor alive by using these false flags, and we know this is going to continue on as time goes on, because nothing has changed. The economy is falling apart and collapsing. They're running out of time. They need to control the entire area. We can see they're taking their proxy army and moving them to different areas within the Middle East to get prepared and ready to go into these countries. And nothing has changed at this point. The biggest change is that Russia and Syria are working together, and the United States and the coalition forces have lost their edge in Syria. And when you back a wild animal in a corner, they come out scratching. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.